the war was over, but something eerie remained. In May 1945, silence fell across Europe, yet thousands of German tanks just sat there, frozen in time. Panthers, Tigers, Panzer IVs, scattered across roads, hidden in forests, parked beside shattered factories like ghosts of a lost empire. So what happens to an army when its machines are still everywhere, but its soldiers are gone?
In connection with the Jewish question, I have this to...
When Germany surrendered on May 8th, its once mighty armored force was already collapsing. Fuel had run dry, factories were bombed out, and retreat after retreat left machines abandoned mid-escape. In places like the Ruhr, Bavaria, and even Berlin, Allied troops stumbled onto tanks left behind with empty fuel tanks, or stripped for parts just to keep others alive. Some crews didn't even wait. They wrecked their own engines and gearboxes before walking away. Why destroy your own weapon, unless you knew it couldn't be saved? The Allies moved fast. This wasn't just cleanup, it was a race for secrets. In the American zone, U.S. intelligence teams swept through sites like Oberursel and Keldorf, tagging and cataloging every vehicle they could find. The British followed at Hillersleben and Sennelager, while Soviet trophy brigades grabbed everything from Silesia to Berlin. But what they found wasn't uniform, it was chaos. Some tanks looked ready to fight, until you realized their insides were worn out or unreliable. Others were nothing more than empty shells. No radios, no optics, no engines. Even brand new builds were incomplete, stalled by bombing and shortages. And the documents? Many had been burned, as if someone wanted these secrets gone forever. By summer 1945, the battlefield had turned into a giant scrapyard under Allied control. Row after row of captured machines sat waiting. But waiting for what? Destruction? Reuse? Or something far more valuable? Soon the mission shifted, from collecting tanks to unlocking their secrets. The United States and Britain weren't just curious, they were determined to crack the code of German engineering. What made these tanks so dangerous in combat? And more importantly, where did they fail? The US shipped some of the most feared machines, Panthers, Tiger Is, Tiger IIs, Jagd Panthers, across the ocean to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. There, engineers pushed them to the limit with brutal tests, firing trials, armor penetration, mechanical stress. The verdict? Deadly guns, sharp optics, but a hidden weakness. Gearboxes and final drives kept breaking down under pressure. Power on the surface, fragility underneath. The British took a closer look back in Germany itself. They compared the Panther's sloped armor and long-range firepower against their own Sherman and Churchill designs. And yes, they were impressed, especially by the optics. But then came the reality check. Maintaining these tanks in real combat conditions? A nightmare. Complex, demanding, and unforgiving. The designs influenced future thinking, but copying them directly? Not worth the trouble. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had its own approach, and it was massive. They collected huge numbers of Panzer IVs, Panthers, and Stugs, not just to study, but to use for training. Their findings matched what they had already seen in war: tough armor, powerful guns, but machines that wore down fast under harsh conditions. By the early 1950s, most of these captured tanks were gone, scrapped once spare parts disappeared. Even the strongest machines couldn't survive without support. But the real mystery wasn't just the tanks, it was what was left behind in secret facilities. At places like Kummersdorf and Hillersleben, Allied teams uncovered incomplete holes in experimental designs, pieces of something bigger, parts of the massive Maus program, fragments of the mysterious E-series. At Haustenbeck, workshops were packed with damaged Jag Tigers, half-repaired Panthers, and crates of spare parts. It was like walking into a project that had been abandoned mid-dream.
So what exactly were these unfinished machines meant to become? And how close was Germany to changing the future of armored warfare forever? The war might have ended, but the real battle over Germany's tanks was just getting started. Every captured vehicle became a question mark. Study it, sell it, or destroy it before history repeats itself. The Allies couldn't agree, and that tension shaped everything that came next. Who gets the secrets, and who makes sure they're buried forever? Strict orders came down fast. Every German armored vehicle had to be reported, locked down, and kept out of the wrong hands. But behind the scenes, arguments were heating up. The United States wanted answers through testing. The Soviets stockpiled massive numbers before deciding their fate. And Britain, short on manpower and transport, took a more selective approach. Yet despite their differences, they all reached the same chilling conclusion. These tanks were deadly, but demanding. Incredible firepower and precision optics, held back by designs that were complicated and fragile. Was this brilliance or a fatal flaw? Once testing wrapped up, a new problem emerged. What do you do with mountains of steel built for war? Between 1946 and 1948, the Allied Control Council made it official. Germany's war machines had to go. Tanks, parts, even unfinished prototypes were now forbidden materials. No second chances, no hidden reserves. Demilitarization had begun, and it was massive. Across industrial hubs like the Ruhr, Saxony, and Thuringia, the destruction was relentless. Steel plants in Bochum, Essen, and Magdeburg became graveyards for armored giants. Trains arrived loaded with Panthers, Panzer IVs, and Stugs, only for them to be cut apart by torches and crushed by heavy machinery. But here's the twist. The same metal once used for war was now rebuilding a shattered country. Bridges, homes, factories, all rising from the remains of destroyed tanks. By late 1947, hundreds had vanished into molten steel, erased almost completely. How do weapons of war just disappear like that? But not every tank met its end in a furnace. In quieter corners of Europe, something stranger happened. Along Austria's Enns River, bulldozers shoved Panthers and other vehicles into riverbanks to hold back erosion. In quarries, tanks were dumped as filler to stabilize dangerous ground. Over time, dirt and grass swallowed them whole, turning weapons into part of the landscape. Imagine walking over a field, not knowing a tank is buried right beneath your feet. Elsewhere, these machines became targets, literally. British ranges like Lulworth, American sites like Aberdeen and Grafenworth, and Soviet training grounds all used captured tanks for live fire practice. Crews tested new ammunition, pushed weapons to their limits, and tore these machines apart piece by piece. Once they were too damaged to use, they were either abandoned or scrapped. Even after the war, these tanks kept getting destroyed, just in a different way. Cleanup crews across Czechoslovakia and Poland had their own mission, clearing the scars left behind. Wrecked tanks were dragged from forests, roadsides, and old defensive lines, then sent off for scrap or reused in land recovery projects. And the secret sites? They didn't survive either. Experimental builds, mouse components, E-series hulls, unfinished designs, were dismantled before they could ever be understood. It was like erasing the final chapters of a story no one was meant to read. Despite the scale of destruction, rumors refused to die. Stories spread about hidden bunkers packed with pristine Panthers or secret warehouses filled with untouched Tigers. But the truth? Most of it was Cold War paranoia or simple misidentification. By 1948, nearly everything had been destroyed. The once dominant German tank fleet was gone, cut apart, melted down, or buried out of sight.
And yet, not all of them vanished. A surprising number escaped destruction and found new life in foreign armies desperate to rebuild. These tanks, once symbols of war, were about to serve new flags in new conflicts, stretching their legacy far beyond 1945. But which countries took them, and how did these former enemies end up relying on German armor to fight again? Some of these tanks didn't just survive, they went right back into action under new flags. France moved fast, collecting Panthers from depots in southwest Germany and putting them straight into service with the 503rd Combat Tank Regiment. On paper, they were impressed. Serious firepower, sharp optics, machines that could still dominate a battlefield. But reality hit hard. These tanks were worn out, fragile, and expensive to keep alive. Crews were forced to strip multiple Panthers just to keep one running. Reports piled up, transmissions failing, parts breaking, maintenance costs spiraling out of control. By 1951, France made the call. The Panthers were done. But here's the twist. Despite all the trouble, these tanks still shaped how France rebuilt its armored forces. Czechoslovakia had a different story, and it was a strange one. During the war, it had been a key production hub for German armor, and after the war, it didn't stop. Factories kept building the Hetzer, now known as the G13, using the same Panzer 38T chassis. And these weren't just leftovers. They were sold abroad, especially to Switzerland, where they stayed in service deep into the Cold War. Why did they last so long? Simple design, reliable engines, and lower costs. While others struggled with complex machines, this one just kept going. At the same time, Czechoslovakia used remaining Panzer IVs and Stugs until Soviet designs slowly took over. Across Eastern Europe, German tanks kept popping up in unexpected places. Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, each using what they could get. Panzer IVs for training, Stugs and early armored units, a patchwork of former enemy machines now serving new governments. But this didn't last forever. By the mid-1950s, Soviet T-34s and newer vehicles replaced them all. The shift was clear. Standardization was taking over, and the old German fleet couldn't keep up.
Then there's Spain, and this is where things get even more unexpected. Back in 1943, Germany had sent Franco's government 20 Panzer IVs and 10 Stugs, and somehow these machines stayed relevant long after the war ended. The Panzer IV became Spain's main tank into the mid-1950s, running alongside much older designs. But time caught up. Maintenance became a nightmare, numbers dropped, and by 1967, Spain sold 17 surviving Panzer IVs to Syria. Yes, Syria. And that's where the story takes a shocking turn. In the 1950s and 1960s, Syria placed these German tanks right on the front lines along the Golan Heights. Think about that. World War II machines, still active decades later, now part of entirely new conflicts. Some even lasted into the 1970s, making them among the last operational German WW2 tanks anywhere in the world. How did they last that long? Pure determination and improvisation. Mechanics built parts from scratch, mixed components from different vehicles, and worked without proper manuals. It was survival engineering at its rawest. But nothing lasts forever. By the mid-1950s, most nations had moved on, replacing German tanks with standardized fleets from the US or the Soviet Union. The survivors? They took on a different role. Silent witnesses to history. Panthers, Tigers, Panzer IVs, now sitting in museums like Bovington, Saumur, and Kubinka, or standing as monuments in quiet towns. From feared weapons to historical relics, the transformation was complete. These machines once ruled battlefields, then were hunted, melted down, buried, or reborn across the world. Their story didn't end in 1945. It evolved, scattered across continents, shaping armies and leaving behind questions that still echo today. So, when a war ends, do its weapons really disappear, or do they just find new ways to keep fighting?